It is my distinct honor to introduce Dave Birchenough, the chair of our board.
Well, thank you, Kelly. This is a very exciting evening for the Finger Lakes Land Trust. In more than 2 decades of serving on nonprofit boards, I have never been more impressed with an organization. The mission, the vision, the impact of our work will be felt for generations to come. Tonight, as we look to the future, our most ambitious plans yet, a campaign we call Finger Lakes Forever, to support our mission. That mission is to conserve forever the lands and waters of the Finger Lakes region, ensuring scenic vistas, local foods, clean water, and wild places for everyone. The best advocates for our mission are folks who love the Finger Lakes, including ABC News anchor David Muir. He's a really very busy guy. I was expecting him to politely decline my invitation to participate in tonight's program. Instead, he said, absolutely. What do you need? Here's David.
Hi everyone, David Muir here from ABC's World News Tonight, and of course, a proud Central New York native. My roots shape so much of what I do here on the news, how I report the news, and I just wanted to say thank you to the great people behind the Finger Lakes Land Trust. I hope you'll join them for the launch of Finger Lakes Forever, their newest effort. For more than 3 decades, protecting the pristine waters, the wildlife, the way of life, as they say in their mission, saving more than 28,000 acres of land and counting. I know if you've lived there, if you've gone to school there, and I've done both, that you can't help but to fall in love with the beauty of those rolling hills, the lakes, the blue-green water, depending on the light, the time of day, the time of year. Even Axel loves being out on the lake. The Finger Lakes region is a treasure, and so many of you have helped to preserve it, and I hope so many more will join in. Let's celebrate our lakes, our land, our love of the outdoors. Let's help the Finger Lakes Land Trust and join their new effort, Finger Lakes Forever.
Man, I wish I was that smooth. So we've been working quietly on this campaign for a couple of years now. Despite the challenges thrown at us by the pandemic, the response has been astounding. We've raised nearly $18 million. Our goal is $20 million. $20 million, and with your help, I know we'll get there. That goal is ambitious, but environmental pressures are rising, and so are the costs associated with fighting them. We are in this for the long haul, and I believe that we are the best positioned organization to lead conservation efforts in our region. As part of a generation that wasn't always mindful of environmental harm, a successful Finger Lakes Forever campaign will be a legacy for which our grandchildren will thank us. I want to send out a heartfelt thank you to those who participated in the quiet phase of this campaign. You gave us the courage to really reach. Now, as we enter the public phase, we are excited to get as many of you as possible involved. So for the last 9 years, it has been my privilege to work alongside Andy Zepp, our executive director. Andy's leadership, vision, and passion are second to none. Here's Andy to tell you about the campaign and the amazing work of the Finger Lakes Land Trust. Go, Andy.
Thanks, Dave. And thanks everyone for joining us this evening. We are going to share a good bit of information about Finger Lakes Forever, our campaign for the Finger Lakes and work that's going on. But before getting into that, we first wanted to set the stage by telling you a little bit about where the Land Trust is at and where we've been. And we thought, who better to start this conversation than someone who's very near and dear to all of us, Betsy Darlington. For those of you who may not have met Betsy is a founder of the Land Trust. She has been an active volunteer for the 32 years of the Land Trust's existence. For many of those years, she was unpaid full-time staff. She and her husband, Dick, donated the first conservation easement to the Land Trust, and the whole Darlington family donated the Logan Hill Preserve. Now, I remember Betsy because I first met her in 1988 when I was a Cornell grad student trying to get through an MPS program in 1 year, so to zoom into Ithaca and zoom back out. And my task was to recruit the founding board of directors of the Land Trust And as I networked in the community, again and again, everyone said, you have to talk to Betsy Darlington. And I'm so glad I did. And now let's take a moment to hear what she has to say about the land trust and her experience with it.
We decided to donate all of what we owned to the land trust except for 15 acres. We have a small cabin on the 15 acres. It was a very special piece of land, and without even trying, you can count 30 different species of birds. Seemed like something that really should be permanently protected, and there was no mechanism for doing that. So the land trust really fit the bill. The land trust is doing something that nobody else is doing in the Finger Lakes region. And there are small organizations which are doing a little bit, but the land trust really set its sights early on to protect land over the whole region. And it took a while to get to that point, but I guess what's been wonderful has been to see it grow. It's been very strategic in what lands to protect. I love nature and the land and having it be there. And seeing around the world so much destruction, you can't deal with that scale. But here, you can make a difference in a small area, and a little difference here, they add up. I used to think, so, okay, this land is protected. You don't have to do anything about it. Well, you do. I just feel that the organization has grown into a really competent, capable, dedicated place. Everybody is pulling in the same direction, and they're working their hearts out for this bigger cause.
Betsy, thanks so much for all that you've done for conservation in our region, and particularly inspiring all of us to do more. Now, before we get into the specifics of the Finger Lakes Forever program, I hope that you'll indulge us by participating. We protect all kinds of different types of land, from lakeshore to gorges to wetlands to farmland and scenic areas, recreational trails, and we're constantly making choices on which priorities to pursue. And we'd like you to participate in a poll, the results of which we'll share. You should see it on your screen, and just want to get a sense of what land do you think is most important for us to protect? It'll just take a moment. We'll leave it up here for a little bit and see if there's consensus or what kind of variety. I see a lot of focus. It looks like streams and wetlands are in the lead, taking a commanding lead. Well, this is great because I can be truthful that the campaign focuses a lot on streams and wetlands. I'm glad I don't have to lie to you all tonight. I also see lake shores ranked high, which is probably the scarcest land resource and the most threatened in all the Finger Lakes region. And that has been a focus for quite some time now. Well, thank you for participating in that. Now, as we look at the future of our region, I'm pleased to report that we've had good success over these past 32 years, but as all of you probably know, we're facing even greater challenges today, from a much hotter real estate market and competition for land than we've ever seen, to the effects of climate change, water quality, habitat loss. There's a myriad of challenges, and that is really what we're trying to address through this Finger Lakes Forever campaign. And we're fortunate that we have such a strong membership and such expertise available through our membership. And we've asked several of our members, Mark Chow, Rebecca Schneider, and Lyndon Archer, to share their thoughts on some of the challenges we face. And here they are.
When you go out onto Finger Lakes Land Trust preserves, you get a sense of how diverse our protected landscapes are. You see deep hemlock woods with blue-headed vireos and scarlet tanagers singing. You can go out onto the sunny edges and you can see indigo buntings advertising their territories. And you can find yellow warblers and chestnut-sided warblers singing and building nests all summer long. This amazing diversity that we see exists because of diverse conserved habitats. Those blue-headed vireos and scarlet tanagers don't exist except for these shady hemlock woods. Those warblers that we see in the sunny areas don't exist except for the availability of that habitat. These landscapes that we have, these diverse, thriving landscapes that we have in the Finger Lakes, are fragile. They're sometimes in jeopardy, and we have less and less of vital habitats that the birds we love need. Having an organization like the Land Trust strategically identify and then work with partners to conserve land is so vitally important. Our thriving, diverse wildlife needs thriving, diverse habitat. That's what the Land Trust does, and that's why we've been so gratified to support them all these years.
I truly believe that New York's water resources are the key to its economic vitality and its psychological vitality. If you care about water, you have to care about the land that surrounds it. That means taking better care of the watersheds, reducing the amount of runoff that occurs, reducing the number of pollutants that move into our lakes. The Finger Lakes Land Trust is not just working willy-nilly, piece here, piece here. They do a really thoughtful analysis of the whole landscape of the Finger Lakes for the overall good of the whole system, and that's what they're really good at.
We moved to the Finger Lakes some 22 years ago, and my wife and I, so my wife is also a professor here at Cornell in biomedical engineering, and I remember the first time we came down Route 13 and saw Cayuga Lake. It's a beautiful part of the country, but then obviously it goes beyond that. The lakes and the surrounding region will play an important part in our effort to get to carbon neutrality. We do need to think about how do we buy forward inevitable carbon dioxide emissions, and there's really nothing like trees and managed resources in the natural environment for achieving that. And so I think, preservation is the first act. I think the second act could be something like management that allows us to not just preserve, but actually to preserve in a sort of ecologically intentional way, with the goal of providing yet another option for reducing humankind's carbon emissions. There are certain aspects of one's carbon footprint that are unavoidable. I travel a lot, and one of the hardest places to decarbonize is actually air travel. And for persons that have to use it, have to have a carbon footprint associated with it, the Land Trust provides a mechanism, I would argue a structured mechanism for paying down, some of that emissions by paying for sequestration. I work on energy storage systems. It's part of the solution, but it is not the total solution to solve this huge grand challenge question for humanity. It's not going to take one magic bullet or two. It's going to take a system of magic bullets, including land use.
Well, clearly, there are many challenges, and we've got our work cut out for us. But I want to now talk about what we're trying to do on a regional level, and not alone, with many, many partners. And that's why I'm optimistic about our ability to address some of these. If you bear with me just a second, I'm going to launch into hopefully, you're all seeing a split screen that I think many Ithacans might recognize. This is not the first project completed by the Land Trust, but this is the first project ever initiated by the Land Trust. In fact, I think we started before the Land Trust was even incorporated. Lick Brook is a magnificent natural area located in the town of Ithaca, literally just about a mile from downtown Ithaca. And what's amazing is it's actually part of a 2,000-acre contiguous block of forest and streams and so on. And this still exists today, and it's accessible by the Finger Lakes Trail You see the picture on the left of someone enjoying it in the 19th century, and on the right, someone in the 21st century. And this really, I think, is what sets land trusts apart, is this sustained effort and this commitment far beyond our lifetimes. So you have these areas that we recognize there will be change, but what we want to do is ensure the integrity of the sites and manage them to the best of our ability. And I think Lickbrook is a good example of, we have challenges. We still have issues of now more intense rain events and erosion and increasing use. But at the same time, we see success. And again, we're not working alone. We have public sector partners, individual landowners, and also other nonprofits. And there are now many more places than Lickbrook. The Land Trust has secured more than 28,000 acres. This includes more than 40 nature preserves and conservation areas that are open to the public. And it includes 168 conservation easements, land that is protected by perpetual legal agreements, typically remaining in private ownership. And we've also worked to establish new parks and expanded conservation areas, working with the municipalities, state and federal government, and other nonprofits. But now, really, we are seeing more intense challenges. And I truly feel that we have a window of opportunity to secure those lands that really define the character of this region. But that window won't stay open too long. And this, we saw in the pandemic, a real change in our real estate market where people are more mobile and people love the Finger Lakes. And that's a good thing because it brings some great people to our region. But in some of these areas like the last sensitive shoreline, it makes it a lot tougher to compete as well for conservation. So among the challenges, habitat fragmentation and loss is a big concern, not a new one, but one that I think is becoming more of a challenge. Rebecca Schneider mentioned water quality, which in some ways I think is an existential threat to the region. These cyanobacteria or toxic algae outbreaks we've been having. Every day we're faced with a new non-native invasive species, whether the emerald ash borer or the quagga mussel, too numerous to count. And the question is how we manage our native natural systems in a way that's most sustainable over time. Climate change, bringing many, many challenges, from more intense rain events and flooding to the need for species to change ranges over time, and can they get to new habitat? And then even issues associated with the solutions. How do we accommodate solar farms and renewable energy in a way that's compatible with our conservation goals? And then many of us enjoy getting out to these places in our region, but there are folks who don't necessarily have access. How can we ensure that our work is accessible to all and equitable across the region? Now, the development threat in some ways is the easiest to understand, and the Finger Lakes, many shorelines have been developed for many, many years. In fact, the shoreline is probably the scarcest land resource for undeveloped shoreline and the most threatened. It's been a priority for the Land Trust. We've been fortunate. We've been able to secure stretches of shoreline on Skaneateles, Owasco, Otisco, Cayuga, Seneca, Keuka, and Canandaigua. So we've had some real success, but we also know that we have to focus on this now because 20 years from now, there may be none left. And some of our lakes are approaching build out on the shoreline. But this is the stakes. This is a photo of the eastern shore of Canandaigua Lake. There are some houses tucked in the trees, but by and large, it's pretty intact forest. And that forest is important because these are steep hillsides with erodible soils that when it's removed, you have more runoff into the lake. Well, this is the west side. And you can see the big difference, and just think about what the impact would be if not just this one area, but we experience build out on all the hillsides overlooking our lakes. It would be a huge impact on the lake, particularly with climate change as we get these more intense storms washing more soil and nutrients into the lake. And this is what that looks like. This is a view of Taganic Point on Cayuga Lake after a storm. And you see sediment being washed into the lake. Some of this is from development perhaps, or road ditches. also from agricultural practices. So it comes from many sources, but this sediment loading the lakes is an increasing concern. It's bringing with it nitrogen and phosphorus that feeds these cyanobacteria blooms. And to give you a sense of the scale, this was, some of you may recall, our first big outbreak of toxic algae was in 2017. And this is a satellite photo from that year. And you can see a massive sediment plume that extends all the way from Ithaca to past Myers Point and Lansing, which is just an astounding load into this lake. And later that year, we had some really bad outbreaks. This one's a little harder to see, but this is the region as a whole. And if you look closely, it's not quite the size of the Cayuga plume, but if you look at Seneca Lake or Owasco Lake, Skinny Atlas, Canandaigua, on the east side, you can see similar plumes. So this is not a problem that's unique to one lake. And with this comes these cyanobacteria outbreaks, hazardous to human health, also problematic for a region with a $2 billion tourism economy. Don't want to go into the lake when you're having an outbreak. And this is, again, in part based on having available nutrients, warm water, still conditions, and there are clearly factors of land use, climate, and increasingly we think also that the invasive quagga mussel may be enabling these outbreaks to a degree by the way they're cycling nutrients in the system, but a huge problem for the region. So what do we do about all this? The Land Trust has embarked on a kind of three-pronged approach, and we're going to continue our protection work, but we want to accelerate it and also focus more on those lands that provide high quality habitat and also in some cases scenic vistas and other values, but also are the lands most important for water quality, because we recognize that is so important for so many different reasons. And that's something we're already in the process of accelerating the pace of our work. Last year, we completed more than 20 real estate transactions, acquisitions, conservation easements, partnership projects. But we also recognize that protecting a tract of woodlands overlooking the lake is a good thing to do, and protecting it keeps things from getting worse, but it may not necessarily make it better. So for that reason, we're also reaching out to our lake associations, soil water conservation districts, and our partners at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to do more in the way of restoration, whether that's reestablishing vegetated buffers that filter runoff while providing habitat for wildlife, restoring wetlands, vernal pools, and also looking at stream restoration, because many of our waterways have been radically altered over the years, and they're contributing a lot of bank erosion and nutrients and soil into the lake because of that. And then in the end, for all these lands we're protecting, to make sure that we're stewarding them properly, whether that means as we invite the public on the land, that the trails are well kept and the bridges are, well maintained, or ecological management to ensure that we have grasslands for grassland birds and forests with native flora, and not brushlands choked by invasive shrubs. Now, the region is vast. Our service area is the size of Vermont. There are more than 200 municipalities, portions of 12 counties. So that means we try to be as nimble as we can, but we also have identified focus areas to be proactive. So we can secure those regions that not just us, but other folks have said are the most important and pristine in the region. One of these is the beautiful south end of Skinny Atlas Lake. Here you're looking at the Staghorn Cliffs, a remarkable feature where the Land Trust has already conserved 2,000 feet of shoreline. At the south end of Skinny Atlas, we've already established 3 nature preserves, added land to Bear Swamp State Forest, secured a number of conservation easement, and all that work continues. And this was an easy place to select. It's a priority project in New York State's open space plan. Audubon recognizes important bird area, and it's the unfiltered drinking water supply for Syracuse. So this is an area where many projects are underway, and that work will continue. Similarly, in the western end of the region, the south end of Canandaigua Lake, very diverse area, extensive wetlands, extensive public lands at High Tor Wildlife Management Area, very scenic vistas, great recreational area, also a priority project for New York State, and also an Audubon important bird area. Land Trust has several preserves, using conservation easement here, adding land to the public lands. All of that will continue as well. And to the south, I think it's about 40% of our service area actually does not drain to the Finger Lakes. It's part of the Susquehanna watershed. And beautiful area between Elmira and Corning. And if you've never paddled it, I highly recommend it. This is one of our focus areas, anchored by our Steggy Hill Nature Preserve, our largest preserve, an ongoing effort to secure this wonderful wild corridor that's very accessible. Now, as I mentioned earlier, shoreline is the most threatened resource in our region. And we had some really good news this year when the largest single parcel of undeveloped shoreline was secured and is now under contract. That is the Bell Station property, which is really cause for celebration because about last August, we learned that this was slated for a very public and widely promoted internet auction. This is 470 acres with 3,400 feet of shoreline. And thanks to a groundswell of public support for conserving it, as well as the leadership of our elected officials, including Governor Kathy Hochul, NYSEG was convinced to cancel the auction, which they did, and subsequently entered into a purchase contract with us. So the Land Trust is under contract, and this is a partnership with the state of New York where our goal is to acquire the land, then transfer it to the state that has long coveted this property to create a public wildlife management area. At the same time, outside of this picture, there are several farm fields at the eastern portion of the property where the town of Lansing and the state are interested in exploring the possibility of using that for solar. So that's another part of this project. But we're most focused on this wonderful shoreline and not only securing this, but adding to it in the future. At the same time, we're working over on Seneca Lake. This is a view actually over the Argetsinger Vineyard near Burdett, where we partnered again with New York State, this time the Department of Agriculture and Markets, to purchase a conservation easement over this scenic vineyard. Further north, though, right now, we're very excited about an acquisition we're working on of 1,000 feet of shoreline that will be retained as a nature preserve. Beautiful mature woodlands on level shoreline that, if not secured, clearly would be one of the last stretches in that area to be developed. Now, away from the lake, we're also working up in the hills. And this is exciting because on one hand, we're seeing the return of large mammals like bobcat, black bear, and fisher. On the other hand, this is really important as we look at climate change of how, with changing climate, will species be able to move to new areas. What you're looking at is a map produced by the New York Natural Heritage Program that is looking at large blocks of forest, but particularly the linkages of how to link areas such as the large forests of northern Pennsylvania to the Catskills and the Adirondacks. And this proposed greenbelt includes our emerald necklace around Ithaca, which is another one of our focus areas, as well as lands we mentioned at the south end of Canandaigua Lake. So here we're working parcel by parcel to knit together this greenbelt, some cases acquisition, but others cases conservation easements. And here's an example of some of that landscape. This is the Wilseyville Valley in the east end of Tompkins County, the town of Caroline. And we've been working here for a number of years, adding land, several parcels to Danby State Forest. But we were thrilled to get a wonderful donation from Anatole and Carolyn Eberhardt of 144 acres of very mature woodland. And we're now working with the Finger Lakes Trail Conference to reroute the Finger Lakes Trail, which was located in an insecure area nearby, so it'll go through the preserve on a secure route. This is something we'll be working on in the coming months and hope to open it to the public by the fall. And this is one of the beneficiaries of all this work. Bobcats, I can tell you, particularly with the trail cams, we're finding that they're doing quite well, and in places like Tompkins County, turning up as close as Ithaca College, Lick Brook, and Ellis Hollow. So we're thrilled to see these animals come back. And yet what I think is important for the future, again, is making sure that these patches of habitat are not isolated from one another. So as we see development go out all too often out the valleys, make sure that there's not a wall of housing separating the hillside forests. Now on the restoration front, we're focused on really buffering our waterways. And that means planting trees, native trees and shrubs that both provide habitat, wonderful habitat for birds, but also help reduce runoff to the nearby waterways. This is a shot from last year at our Kehoe Preserve on the Chemung River, where we partnered with the Upper Susquehanna Coalition to plant about 1,000, I think it was as many as 1,000 trees and shrubs in a field that was previously 99.5% non-native invasive shrubs. Now the work begins, and we get into the stewardship side of things, in that those trees were a lot of work to plant, but the real work is getting those trees to live to be 10 years old and managing the invasive plants that grow faster, and also protect them from the deer that would love to eat them any chance they get. We're also working in partnership with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to restore vernal pools and wetlands. And our area, even where forested, still is profoundly shaped by its agricultural history. All but the steepest slopes were farmed in the late 18th and early, or the late 19th and early 20th century. And if you go through our forests, you notice that the ground in many areas is fairly uniform. And that's not the way it was before settlement. Old growth forests, when they topple over, would have hummocks and swales. But if you were a first generation farmer trying to make a living, boy, you try to get rid of those wet areas and flatten it out so you could plow it. So what we're doing in areas is trying to put that diversity back on the landscape. So what you're looking at is our Staghorn Cliffs Preserve on Skinny Atlas, where the Fish and Wildlife Service helped us create several vernal pools and wetlands. And on one hand, this is terrific habitat, both for amphibians, but birds. These last year were just about 6 months old. I flushed spotted sandpiper, waterfowl out of them. And also they're important for runoff, because without them existing, essentially the water from a hard rainfall runs down a nearby gully and shoots those nutrients into the lake. What's trapped in these ponds gradually filters down to the groundwater, and those nutrients settle on the land. So it's really a win-win. Here's what one of those ponds looks like up close. Again, this was about 7 months after it was constructed. It was a wet year. Some by design will be dry in a dry year, but still have significant habitat value. Now, actually today, as we're here, there is heavy equipment parked up at our Van Riper Conservation Area on Cayuga Lake. And while this looks like a bit of a mess at the moment, this is a very exciting project where we're partnering with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Seneca County Soil and Water District to restore a stream that, like many of our streams, has been radically altered for the worse by transportation infrastructure, highways. In this case, nearby State Route 89 essentially acts like a dam across a long hillside. So all what was diffuse sheet flow is channeled into one culvert that shoots this water down this poor little stream with tremendous velocity. As a result, it was eroding to depths of 8-9 feet and scouring all this soil and all the nutrients in it into Cayuga Lake. So what the contractor is doing here is using natural materials of logs and stone to first build up the stream bed so it's not as deeply incised, but then create a more natural riffle and pool system that creates better habitat, but also diffuses all that energy so it'll be a more stable system. For those that are interested, this is an area we will be taking out field trips, and it will evolve over the next few years, and we'll be very interested to see how it turns out. We hope it'll be a model, because this is a very small stream, but this is a very common problem. And this natural approach, we think, is far superior to some traditional ways of essentially lining it with riprap rock. Now, in terms of stewardship, we're also well aware of the need to host people in our preserves and ensure that they're safe and enjoy their visit. So toward that end, we're really raising the bar in terms of our public access infrastructure. We're doing it in a balanced way, though, because we recognize that we don't want to overwhelm these sites with too many people. So we're very careful in designing trail systems to make sure they're areas that don't have trails, so wildlife can be undisturbed. But in this particular site, our Roy H. Park Preserve in Tompkins County, in the town of Dryden, we built this accessible boardwalk. But then again, with these intense storms, we found that the path from the parking area of the boardwalk was washing out. So it was no longer as accessible as we would like. So through the campaign, we're investing. We right now have a engineer, a civil engineer, and a landscape architect kind of designing how to ensure that this will be resilient and withstand these storms, while at the same time, in partnership with New York State, extending the trail and adding an overlook that would be accessible to all on the adjacent Hammond Hill State Forest. So very excited about this project. And this is one of a number of stewardship projects underway. A lot at the front end of creating this public access improvements, but then in the long run, committing to maintain them in a way that's appropriate. Now, I do want to recognize that our stewardship program, the backbone of it, we do have staff, and we have a terrific staff, but we every year involve more than 200 volunteers who really leverage your contributions and make what we do possible, whether that's trail work, whether it's controlling invasive species, invasive brush, and so on. So this will continue. And as the land trust grows, it's our hope that we will continue to grow our ability to support these volunteers. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we're also committed to ensure that nature is accessible to everyone in our region. So on one hand, that may mean us making a special effort to get people out to our preserves, like this English as a second language class that visit our Thayer Preserve near Ithaca. But it's also having us look at possibly doing protection work in communities that just don't have as much accessible open space. For example, in the Northern Finger Lakes, because you're surrounded by farm country, many of the communities, say Auburn or Geneva, you have much more limited opportunities to get out in nature than you do in places like Ithaca. So we're looking at that and talking to local community leaders and thinking about how we might work together to create more community open space. This is very much a work in progress, but something we're committed to, and welcome your input as well. So the campaign is a lofty goal, but I think the question many of you might be most interested is, what's it going to accomplish? Well, through the quiet phase, we've already done a lot. So there are many accomplishments we can share that have happened. Bell Station hopefully will close within a month. But just to give you a sense of what we're committed to in the next year alone, and the resources raised through the campaign will go on beyond that. But during the next year alone, we're committed to conserve more than 2,000 acres within identified focus areas through acquisitions, but a lot of that through conservation easements as well. Secure more than 4,400 feet of Finger Lake shoreline, close to a mile. Protect 21 miles of stream bank, and then establish 3 new public access points to the Finger Lakes Trail in partnership with the Finger Lakes Trail Conference. So these are some of the results, and it's not all of the results. There's also restoration work that will be going on, other stewardship improvements. So this just gives you a sense of, in the next year, what we're committed to do. Now, many of these projects also leverage public resources, and we've been very fortunate to have New York State as a partner, whether that's the State Department of Environmental Conservation, New York State Parks, or the Department of Agriculture and Markets. And we've also been fortunate to have elected officials who are strong supporters of land and water conservation. For example, the Bell Station issue, both Senator Pam Helming and Assemblymember Anna Kellis really did some heavy lifting to make that happen. And I was delighted that they were both willing to share their views, and you'll hear a little bit now about their perspective on our conservation efforts.
We're so fortunate to live in one of the most beautiful regions in America, the Finger Lakes. Like you, I love this area. And like you, I'm committed to protecting our lakes and our watersheds and preserving our lands so that we and future generations can enjoy a rich and thriving region. This is what we value: clean lakes, safe drinking water, healthy local food, abundant natural resources, thriving wildlife, and the extensive recreational opportunities. Finger Lakes Land Trust has been an incredible partner to New York State as we work together on these critical initiatives. In fact, over the years, together we were able to successfully preserve thousands of acres of prime ag soils and prevent the overdevelopment of lands in our environmentally sensitive areas. And we continue to build upon that success today. From the preservation of Bell Station and more than 470 acres of pristine land along Cayuga Lake, to the opening of the Canandaigua Vista Nature Preserve with a trail and a stunning view of Canandaigua Lake. It has been truly an honor to work with Finger Lakes Land Trust and our local communities. I truly appreciate your leadership, your collaboration, and your passion.
The work that we are doing in the Finger Lakes for water preservation is one of the most important jobs that we have. About 4% of the water on the planet is freshwater, and a tiny fraction of that is surface, unfrozen freshwater. So preserving the waterfront around the Finger Lakes and minimizing deforestation of the very steep slopes is absolutely critical. Being involved in the effort to preserve Bell Station is one of, I think, the things that I will remember for the rest of my life. This partnership was so inspiring. It was critical and time sensitive. Ultimately, the Public Service Commission and the governor and the community and the DEC, Finger Lakes Land Trust, and my office worked together, recognizing the incredible value of this land. One of the most important roles that the Finger Lakes Land Trust played was educating the local community, and as a result, over 5,000 local residents signed the petition. What the Finger Lakes Land Trust is doing is nothing short of protecting our future. They bring heart to everything they do at the same time. Such a rare combination of incredible knowledge and science with heart and passion for this work.
Well, I think you can see why we're inspired. And that's why we set our goals high with the Finger Lakes Forever campaign. The campaign is, well underway. We've raised $18 million towards our $20 million goal. And of that amount, it really covers three particular funds. Approximately $7 million is committed to land and water conservation projects, everything from buying land to growing our opportunity fund that is in part making possible the Bell Station acquisition. This is a revolving fund that we're able to tap for time-sensitive projects, and then we replenish to use again. At the same time, those restoration projects I mentioned, we're shifting into, in addition to spending money on land, providing some private match money for public programs such as restoring that stream. That's also part of the land and water component. Another big component of the campaign is our stewardship fund, because we know as you look at the future and you think of more people, more invasive pests, more land to steward. If we do not grow the stewardship fund, we won't be able to maintain these lands that we're committed to protect. So approximately 7 million of campaigns funds will go to that. And that is a professionally managed mixed portfolio of which we draw 4% of the portfolio a year to support our stewardship operations. And that is something we look at for the long haul and think, just focus on the future of that growing 10, 20, 50 years from now or more. And then the last part of the campaign is supporting our program. So over the last few years, covering our operations so that whether it's any of these projects or, for example, time that we've been spending trying to facilitate the protection of another project on Cayuga Lake, Camp Barton. And that's one I'm pleased to report is looking very positive, and one that we may end up playing kind of a behind the scenes role in applauding a wonderful partnership between New York State Parks and several municipalities. So moving forward, I highlighted our goals this year. They're very ambitious. The goals beyond that are equally ambitious, but we've got a lot of momentum. And now is the time, because I can tell you on the other side of the coin, we're seeing appreciation of land values like we've never seen. So on one hand, we've been able to have some great success in recent years. On the other hand, I can tell you that land values are skyrocketing, and it's going to be harder to secure the lands that are particularly close to the lake. So there will be plenty of opportunities moving forward to learn more about the campaign, and you'll hear more about that toward the end of the program. But now I'd like to go back to several videos and hear from some of our members firsthand of what they think about the campaign and our region.
I moved to Rochester 10 years ago, and it was the first time I had seen this place. It was my first visit. I'm originally from the Himalayas, from the Indian Himalayas. I really feel connected to a land when it is physically so dramatic, and I find that in Finger Lakes. So one of the guiding principles of Happy Earth Tea has been to have as little an impact as possible on the environment. And one of the reasons we partnered with Finger Lakes Land Trust, it gave us that ability to have a more positive impact. It's something that we demanded, it's something that our customers demanded, it's something that the times demanded. We're living in times when climate concerns are real. We have young children, we have to explain things to them, and they have some honest questions about the viability of the future. And I think we are very much aware of that and moved by the urgency of those issues. We are excited, really excited to be able to be part of the Finger Lakes Land Trust family.
So it all started, I had a change jar that I'd saved up for months, years, and I really just didn't really know what to do with it. And it just eventually came up, hey, let's donate it to the Finger Lakes Land Trust. And we just went with that, and I was able to become Conservationist of the Year. And honestly, that was such a great honor. But me being in like 5th grade, didn't quite understand the concept of it, but I knew I had hopefully done something right and good in the world, and I was excited for it. I can't put a finger on it, but I'd say around $100 to $150 and change saved up. I like to help the environment. I like to help people, make sure nature and people stay safe. So those things are really interconnected with each other, and I think that's kind of developed where I want to go with my life. I want to stay a part of the land trust. I want to speak out, maybe get other people in on it. It's really important that we keep it up.
I grew up in Massachusetts, but I moved here in 1966, and I celebrated the very first Earth Day at Carpenter's Falls, which is now part of the Finger Lakes Land Trust properties. you don't think about it when you're that young, but then when you later do have young children, you begin to realize that these things won't stay the same very long. They change very rapidly. And it's a wonderful thing when you wake up and realize that maybe you can do something to contribute to things staying pure and clean and open in places that are very important to the environment, because it can change in a heartbeat. We're very, very lucky to have the Finger Lakes Land Trust in this area.
When someone chooses to join the Land Trust, what they're really doing is investing in making the area right, not just for ourselves, but for the generations that follow. Everybody can make a difference. Let's make it better where we are. Let's make this area and its watershed as good as we can for as long as we can.
When I joined the Land Trust Board nearly a decade ago, I never would have imagined that we could have raised $18 million. Again, a special thanks to you who have contributed to our campaign so far, and to those of you who will help us get to our goal of $20 million. Thank you. This concludes the formal portion of our presentation. If you'd like, we invite you to stay on for a question and answer period with Andy. And while transitioning to the Q&A, please take a moment to click on the link in chat and take part in a one-question poll, as we'd love to hear what got you excited from tonight's announcement. Again, you can click on a link in chat to give us your feedback.
It's so wonderful to see all of these comments and just the diversity of responses and excitement over what we're trying to do. So thank you so much for all of these, wonderful, thoughtful responses. We really appreciate it. And as Dave said, we are going to transition now to Q&A. So if you have questions for Andy, he will be ready to answer them, I'm sure. There's been a few that have already come in through the chat, and so I can get us started. So one of the first ones I noticed, Andy, was, can you explain conservation easements and how they play a role in conservation and preservation?
Yeah, this is a very important tool, and it's not well understood because many of you are probably familiar with a driveway easement or a power line easement, something that's kind of an affirmative right. But a conservation easement is really a set of limitations on future use of the land. Can you subdivide? Can you develop? If so, how? And this is recorded in the land record, so it's binding on all future owners. The easement, the beauty of an easement is it can be tailored to the specifics of the property. So for example, in the Montezuma marshes, an easement might be quite restrictive versus an easement on a dairy farm might have a lot of retained uses. They can either be sold or donated, and there's some tax incentives associated with that. And the other thing is that typically easements are on land that remains in private ownership and available for traditional uses such as forestry or agriculture. So it's a significant tool for us, but one that gets maybe a little less attention because if all goes well, these lands keep doing what they're doing, whether it's a farm or a rural residence, and the preserves tend to get more attention.
Excellent. Kind of along that same lines, thinking about the different tools that we use to conserve lands, how does the Finger Lakes Land Trust determine how many preserves to operate and manage versus facilitating the transfer of lands to other partners?
Well, there's a couple key questions. One is the characteristics of the site, and is the partner going to manage it in a way we think is a good way to do it? So for example, we recognize that when we work with the state of New York and we help them acquire a piece of land, we have no legal tie. We don't hold a conservation easement on that property. And the reason is because the state doesn't allow it. So we understand going in that the approach to managing a state forest might be different than a nature preserve, but that's just something we understand. The bigger challenge though is with such a vast area, we can't possibly steward all the land that should be conserved, and neither can New York State. So the good news is that we do have a small but growing number of partners. So for example, we've worked with the town of Ithaca to create parks. Ontario County, we helped secure Grimes Glen. And particularly for these actively used areas, Camp Barton on Cayuga Lake's another example. The Land Trust has stewardship capability, but we really we're not set up to manage public parks that have a lot of active use and frankly, a lot of liability as well. So it is case by case, and it's something in the future we hope to continue to develop more partners so that there are other groups that can help us manage this land. Because that's the challenge that if something happens on a weekend on a property somewhere, that there's got to be someone paying attention to make sure that land is stewarded. So to some degree, it's strategic, and some degree, there's also a bit of triage.
Great. Andy, we work all across the region, but we have one question from some folks who are particular about the Cayuga Lake area and are wondering if we have any projects planned in the future around Cayuga Lake.
We do. We're working on several conservation easements that will secure woodlands overlooking the lake, as well as kind of near Penn some farmland projects, an area we've worked before. We've conserved several farms on 14A, but that's an area we hope to do a lot more work. And toward that end, we are partnering with the Finger Lakes Museum in Branchport to hire a shared intern who will help with some of their outreach efforts. But for us, they will work in the town of Jerusalem to complete some landowner surveys and provide information to landowners about the land trust and conservation easements, because we're hoping to get a boost and do much more work, particularly in areas like Bluff Point.
Great. There's one in here that I think actually I can answer, and that's will you take the campaign name and logo and use it for marketing like shirts and stickers, etc. And yes, we are hoping to open a spring merch store sometime in the next month or so. So stay tuned on that, but we will hopefully use the logo. Beautiful logo is designed by Iron Design here in Ithaca, and we are hoping to put it on a shirt or something so that people can proudly represent. I have one other question here from kind of early on. And that is a little stickier subject. It's about Bitcoin mining. And this person just wondered if you could talk a little bit about the challenges brought on by Bitcoin mining.
Well, there are two different challenges, and I'll speak to them in that the land trust is frequently asked to take advocacy positions, and we typically don't, with the exception of fracking, that was this region-wide, issue, because quite simply, we're the only group that does what we do, and to do advocacy well, it takes time and effort as well. And there's so many issues that's just not the way we're designed to function. So personally, in the case of the Greenwich station in particular, I personally think that's kind of crazy in the era of climate change to use energy in that way. But the Land Trust does not have a formal position on that because we're not designed as an advocacy group. At the same time, with the Bell Station project, we are involved not by design, but by circumstance with a possible solar project. And if that proceeds, we want to make sure that that solar energy is used for perhaps things other than Bitcoin. So we're paying very much attention to that issue relative to that Bell Station project, because we want to see that help address our other energy needs and not the Bitcoin needs.
Great. I had one question pertaining to the shoreline number that you provided, and they wondered if the 4,400 feet of shoreline included Bell Station, or if that was a station.
It does. So actually, I can tell you that there's 3,400 feet at Bell Station, 1,000 feet at Seneca Lake, and then if all goes well, a little more. That a mystery site to be revealed later.
You have to stay tuned, sign up for our e-news, and then you'll be the first to know. Let's see if there's more questions in here. There's some follow-up to the Bitcoin question. And then there's this, are there volunteer opportunities with the FLLT?
Absolutely. And one of the easiest way to get connected as a volunteer is to contact our Ithaca office. We have a trailblazer list for our stewardship team, and they announce various work days, and you can come for one afternoon or spend a lot of your time and come to many, many events.
We have somebody who's wondering how we get most of our land donations.
Well, some people I think are just love the land, and I think of folks like the Eberhards or the Darlingtons who are very passionate about land conservation, who made these tremendous commitments. I think increasingly though, because we want to be strategic, we find a lot of times that whether someone isn't interested in conservation or simply needs to send kids to college and can't afford it, more and more we're in a position of needing to purchase the land, because if we look at from a strategic standpoint at which lands need to be protected, sometimes we're lucky that there's that person who's both passionate about conservation, able to do so. But that's why this campaign is so important, because to create strategic, green belts of conserved land, a lot of that's going to need to be purchased.
Another person is wondering, did we successfully raise the $500,000 for Bell Station?
We did, and thanks to everyone who contributed, which is just fantastic. And I should add, in record time. The support was tremendous. And where that funding is so important is because to make the purchase happen, we're using what we have available in our opportunity fund, our own opportunity fund, and it's not enough. And then fortunately, the Park Foundation is making available $2 million in a very generous loan. And then this is the gap. So now we're set. If all goes well, we will close in early May, and with some minor trail improvements, make that accessible to the public this summer. And and there will be stewardship, even though we may only own that property if all goes well, 12 to 18 months. But also we know that that's been kind of a neglected property. There's been a history of some abuse there. So part of our stewardship, even if only for that year and a half, is to help clean up that site, help make some improvements, and help police that site for the course of that year to make sure that it's not degraded.
I have two stewardship related questions, and one is the wood to build the signage in the boardwalk sourced from the actual preserves?
Rarely, because we manage our preserves for two habitats. What we call early successional habitat of grassland or shrubland that is scarce in our region because of the nature of agriculture these days. And then for forests, we're typically managed for old growth forest because that's another rare habitat type. So we don't cut a lot of trees in our preserves, though there are some occasions we'll cut locust. Typically we use locust because it is the most rot resistant wood. And we typically buy that from one or two local mills that specialize in that. So typically it's not from our preserves.
Okay, I think we have time maybe for one or two more questions, and then people are very welcome to email me after this, or if I don't get to your question, and Andy and I or the appropriate staff person will definitely follow up. One more on the stewardship though for you, Andy, and I know you love these. This is an invasive buckthorn question. We have lots of buckthorn on our land in Canandaigua Lake. What particular activities does the FLT engage in regarding invasives?
Well, there are a couple of different things. One is there are so many invasives, just in terms of woody vegetation, of buckthorn, autumn olive, multiflora rose, bush honeysuckle, Asiatic bittersweet is a vine. There are just so many that we're picking our battles. And I can tell you right now, we're at our Owasco Bluffs Preserve battling buckthorn to clear a planting area where we're going to plant native trees and shrubs. And it's kind of an overwhelming issue. But as we do that, we're also taking some of the goodwill we've developed with our partners and trying to get more resources to institutions like Cornell to look at more systemic approaches of how we might control these, or not eliminate them, but at least beat them back so the natives have more of a chance. So for example, purple loosestrife used to be much more of a problem, but through research that led to a biological control of introducing some pests to that, it's a lot better than it was. And that's something, as we work on the parcel level, we do see the need to address that more at a state, national, even international level. Another issue like that is deer management. We have a big deer overpopulation problem that we try to address as we can, but really it's beyond property lines, and the state needs to address it.
Okay, one more question, and then we just encourage you for sure to email us. And then one comment, which is, yes, we will definitely plan something when we close Bell Station. So for everybody who's excited about their project, stay tuned on that. About one last question is about fracking, and if there is fracking activity in the region, and what is our position on that?
I'm not aware of any. This, boy, Kelly, maybe you can remember how many years ago it was now, that when it was proposed, time has passed quickly. We focused particularly on the state's environmental impact statement that had serious deficiencies, and it never made it past that. So I am not aware of any fracking activity. And, you know, we do not allow drilling on our lands or easements allowing drilling. So we are quite thrilled with that outcome, because it would have been a huge problem, aside from the direct impact of the complication of all these mineral rights potentially being severed from properties. So that it would make it difficult, even if it was unlikely, to have certainty that we could control and achieve a conservation outcome.
Yeah. Well, that is going to wrap up our program for tonight. But again, this is being recorded, and so you are welcome to share it or watch it again. We're so thrilled that, you know, with all of the support, and thankful that everybody came out tonight. Again, if you have any questions, my email is in the chat, and you can reach out. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.